I think one of the hardest questions in design is how do you be a better designer? And I think one of the key elements is taste. Like that is one of the hardest things to teach, like how to know when something is good and when something is not good. And I think the key is to just having lots of those little repetitions of looking at something, assessing, is that doing what I wanted to do, or is it not?
Welcome to the Styleframe Saturdays podcast, the podcast dedicated to ideation, visual storytelling, and concept development as it pertains to an animated production. We'll be breaking down the brief of our guests' favorite style frames, and we'll also get a glimpse into the inspiration and workflows behind their frame of choice as well. That was Ben Marriott, a Sydney-based designer and animator, and the driving force behind some of YouTube's most popular animation tutorials. His platform covers everything from technique to workflow and some behind-the-scenes industry advice as well. His enthusiasm for the craft and helping others is infectious and can be felt in all of the work that he creates, including the frame that he's sharing with us today. So let's go check it out. Hey, Ben, thanks for coming on the show today. It's a pleasure to have you here. How's everything going?
Thank you so much for having me. It is great. It is wonderful to be here. I'm doing well. It's getting cold over here in Sydney, but we're surviving.
I know, which is crazy because it is quite warm here in New Jersey today. I've got the air blowing above me as we speak. And so I always kind of forget that with you guys over there. It's hopefully going to be starting to, well, no, I think we got a few more months until it starts warming up over there, right?
A few more months, but we can survive. Yes. We've done this before.
You were recently on vacation too, which is really nice. Did you go anywhere? Did you stay local? Did you go international?
I did. I went to China. I went to Singapore and then Malaysia for a conference, Pixarama in Kuala Lumpur, where I was giving a talk, which is wonderful. I had such a fun time there.
Oh, very nice. What was your talk about, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, my talk. Okay, the title was "How to Relieve Creative Constipation," and it was all about how to stop overthinking and get more comfortable being creative and producing more when you're trying to, which is advice I need to take on because it's something I struggle a lot with. So that was kind of me helping myself work through that.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, no, I could use a bit of that as well. If they decide to put that talk up somewhere online, you're going to have to let us know because I definitely would love to take a look at it for sure.
Oh, I will. Everyone will hear all about it if it goes up online.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to dive right into things with you if that's cool. For those in our audience who may be unfamiliar with your work, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the field of motion design?
Yeah, well, currently, so I teach motion design, 2D animation, more illustrative motion graphics, kind of that's my little genre. And I teach that on YouTube with lots of tutorials and process and workflow videos. Also sell courses online as well, but mainly on YouTube is where you'll find me. And I got into the industry probably, it would be at least 10, 15 years ago now, just about. We're coming up on. I feel strange to say. It always feels like I just got into the industry, but like looking back, I know it's been a while. Originally, like I studied design at university, graphic design, and I was always into art as a kid. Everything was always painting and drawing, but I suppose you get to the point where your parents say, well, you need to get a job, son. So I think, well, graphic design is as close as a compromise I can get. And after that course, which is 4 years, I kind of realized graphic design, it's a lot of text boxes and rectangles and picking out fonts, which wasn't my favorite thing. But illustration was what I got really into. So I decided to be a freelance illustrator straight out of uni with no experience, which I would not particularly recommend to most people. I found it very difficult. But
very bold, yeah.
Yeah, I managed to be represented by an illustration agency, which was incredibly helpful because they helped me get the jobs, which was the hardest part at the time. And just, I don't even know where the motivation came from, but at some point I did a few tutorials for After Effects and learned a little bit of animation. So I had the tiniest knowledge of animation and doing frame by frame in Photoshop as well. And I was the only person represented by them that had some animation skill. So when they would get an animation job, which became more and more frequent, they would kind of just get pushed onto me. And I was like, oh, this is great. And then I slowly picked up skills from those jobs. And they, were more often than not more high paying than the illustration jobs. And I just found I enjoyed that process a lot. It was so fun to see the illustrations and the designs come to life. So I think after about 2-3 years doing freelance illustration and a bit of animation, I got a job at a video production company doing designs for their motion graphics projects. And then over 3 years there, I just added more and more motion design into my workflow because I enjoyed that way more than design at that point. So that's how I got into motion design. And then I went freelance for a couple of years, and then started the YouTube channel. And now we're here. So that's the compressed timeline of my motion design journey.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong too, but I thought I had read on your site that you had worked at Buck at one point or another. Was that freelance or full time or?
That was freelance. It was
okay, cool.
Exceptional timing because it came just as I started the YouTube channel. So this was my second year of freelance. So the first year had gone well. Okay. The first year I wasn't homeless, which was my goal for the first year. I think most people turning freelance is like expect the worst. So that went all right. So I figured, well, I want to get better jobs. I want to get cooler projects. I think so. I figured if I upload some stuff to YouTube and taught some things that I'd learned about, maybe that would attract clients and think, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. Let's hire him to do these projects. So that's why I started uploading on YouTube. But at the same time, I got the call from Buck, which is always my dream at the time because I've got an office here in Sydney. So I'd been for a long time looking over, saying maybe I could go in there, which was great. And then so essentially that first year, I freelanced only for them. I decided, all right, I'll take the freelance jobs from Buck. Everyone else, I'll say no to that I'm busy, and then work on the YouTube channel in parallel. And then I think I say I got lucky because it was the right place at the right time. Because if Buck would have approached me before the YouTube channel, I don't think I ever would have started the YouTube channel. I would have been too in to that world and really wanted to go, to go work at Buck because that was my dream job at the time. But the YouTube channel just started taking off that year. And it was at the end of the year when I decided to go full time on YouTube, and that was my last freelance job was for Buck back in it was December 2019. It's my last client job, so it's been 5 years now full time on YouTube, which I was very grateful for. I do miss miss a lot of the camaraderie and working together on big projects, but not the feedback that I don't miss.
Well, it's really cool to hear though that you were sort of starting the YouTube channel, at least from what I'm hearing, that, you were using it as a way to sort of like, do some like lead generation too. Sort of like, hey, if they can see the techniques that I'm doing and the type of work that I can do, then maybe that'll bring some clients in. And, it sounds like it worked because the Buck thing kind of happened right at around the same time. But it's amazing to see that it's like taken off as this just like, you've built like a motion empire over on YouTube now.
Oh, thank you.
Well, let's jump into then sort of some of the stuff that you've talked about on your tutorials, with all the design and animation and illustration stuff. So that being said, I'd love to chat about the frame that you're sharing with us today. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Okay, so the frame I'm sharing is what I think is my proudest design frame that I've done. It is from my latest design course, and it's for the major project, which is part of the end where we spend 2-3 weeks working on one project. And the project I chose was called Life in Chemistry. So it's a for a fictionalized documentary title sequence. So I try to frame the major project as what your dream project would be, and this is something I would love to do, like an intro sequence. Like ever since I think I saw the True Detective title sequence, I fell in love, and I thought this is what motion design can be. It can be evocative, to tell a little story, set the tone for something, and be part of a larger project, and kind of leech some prestige and information from that. So the frame I want to share is a bacteriophage, which is this virus structure, and I don't think I mentioned the name of the documentary is Life in Chemistry. So this is about what how life exists at a chemical level, and what makes something living and not living, and that interesting combination where something goes from inorganic to organic, and those definitions I always find so interesting, and that mix of chemistry and biology. So I just had so much fun setting the stage for these designs, like coming up with interesting compositions, because that's something I'm interested in. I like science. Science, as a as an outsider, as a voyeur of like, I like watching documentaries, not actually in the lab where it's a lot of time and effort and work. None of that actual stuff, but looking at cool things and thinking, wow, wouldn't that be interesting? Yeah, and I really wanted to blend kind of that tiny small scale of chemical elements with this big grand scale of the cosmos, and make it seem like these could be objects in space at an enormous scale. And this one is of a bacteriophage. I think it's bacteriophage, I think is what this one's called, which are tiny small things, like minuscule. But I really wanted to frame this as if it was this like space station, because its shape is so kind of bizarre, and it has like all these towers and sort of things, I guess tendrils coming out, like these spokes at the top. And they're just really interesting shapes. And the shapes are not like really accurate to what the things look like, but kind of how they're represented in scientific, textbooks, and like in diagrams to make it understandable. Same with like atoms, how they always look like the circles with the thing spinning around. I think that's pretty outdated of what they actually look like, and maybe even how they represent them. But I think that image is just so iconic and interesting, and I love that like graphic symbol, and trying to turn that into something that's real and tangible and on this big scale. So that was I guess the impetus for the start of this project.
Oh, very cool. So you might have briefly mentioned this as I was taking a look at the the frames and the composition for this one. This was a client project?
No,
or
so
personal project?
A personal project. It's, I guess, fictitious. So this part of the course. So for the major project, it's to imagine there's three client briefs, and you can adapt your own one, but that has specific outcomes and goals. Like, this is for a prestige TV series with this title to be on Netflix or HBO or somewhere like that. So there is an invisible client out there that does not exist, that you're trying to meet the meet the expectations and receive feedback from. So I'm imagining an actual client, but it is a personal project.
Okay, cool. No, I wasn't sure if it started out as sort of like a derivative of a client project that was sort of like, oh, this could be like a good idea for like a course or something like that. But to hear that you kind of came up with all of that, that's really cool too. I mean, and then the frames, my God. Yeah, I mean, I love all of them. I know we're focusing on this particular microphage. Is that what you said?
Bacteriophage, but
bacteriophage,
I'm not too confident on that myself. But any of them, I really like.
I was going to say, I'm not a chemist either, so that makes the two of us. But
chemists out there, let us know in the comments.
Yes, right. Yeah, if any chemists are joining, let us know what the exact word is for this. But so I mean, really cool concept and everything. I love that you sort of like pulled like the whole idea for it, and then sort of like created a real world scenario for this, for the course and everything. I guess sort of start from the beginning with this. Like, yes, we have these beautiful frames, this beautiful frame that we're focusing on in particular. Like, what was the start of the ideation process for you? Like, how did you, arrive at these colors, and, what was informing sort of like the sort of different decisions on like scale? Like you had said, you wanted to create this sort of bigger macro world focusing on these tiny little micro things. I mean, how did the whole, I guess, concept start?
Well, I definitely, the first start of the process is always research, which will be, visual research. So creating a mood board, and I think I've put an example in here that you can see the mood board that I created, which, let's see, it's got a whole bunch of, I think, a few like scientific, like textbook, I think, images, I think from the 50s or 60s, of some diagrams, and then some macro photography of some small living creatures, and then of some giant planets in that scale, and I think one's of a petri dish, and like just a combination of images that I think evoke a kind of sort of epicness and like this other world, like at the small scale and the large scale, that I think would answer the brief really well. And that first, like the initial how I work through a mood board is I just start a board on Pinterest, just because it is very easy to source images and collate them. And I added, I think, more than 100 images to that, just finding things that I thought would look really cool and sort of evoke less so the specific aesthetics, but like just the vibe. I guess so. That's what the mood of the board. And then normally I collate all those images, and then I pick the best like 5 or 6 that really capture that. I find if you make a mood board too broad or too even specific on certain things, a client can get really attached to something, or really not like something and say, oh no, we don't like this direction. But that might just be because I used one image, and one of the actors or a person in that image, they were wearing a costume that wasn't appropriate or something. And it's like it's the smallest thing that a client can pick up on and not understand that that's not too relevant to the entire project. So I try to just remove as many opportunities for mistakes or interpretations as possible. And I'm not sure I provided this, but I always give a little summary as well, like a description with text underneath. I think that's a really good practice for anyone starting out in design, is like really try to explain your designs in writing to the client, like to really sell them. Because I know no one wants to do that. It is not fun. We just want to make cool designs, but you get to make cooler designs if you can sell your good ideas to the client and convince them that this is a good idea and it will solve their problems and that they're in safe hands. And I think the more like the better practice you are about writing about your own designs and why they are good, I think the better you are and the less uncomfortable that become. So I always try to do that, especially like if a client's, because I used to work in, I think there's video production companies where we'd all pitch kind of ideas. And if there was 3 different ideas from 3 different people, but one of them had like a rationale and explained why it was the idea to go for, that more often than not was the one that got chosen, because there is more, I guess, it's less of a risk the client perceives if they're just going blind into, I guess these images look cool.
I mean, isn't that amazing though? Like, just a simple thing like, being able to sort of be very descriptive in terms of writing what you're going to sort of achieve with design and animation. I mean, that just, like it seems so obvious, but then hearing you saying, I'm just like, no, you know what? I think, I don't know if I really paid attention to that, like, at former staff jobs and this and that, but it's such a great idea. I totally agree with you. Something that Ryan Summers also talks about a whole lot too, like, like really get comfortable about writing about your own work and stuff too, because it really is, it just broadens that skill set even more. So great points with that.
Thank you. So this is the mood board I created for this project. And then luckily it was approved by our imaginary client. So then I moved on to the ideating, the thumbnail phase, coming up with ideas of what the boards would be. So the aim for this project was not to create the whole designs for the whole project, but to create like a pitch deck that will sell the idea. So it was to create 4 style frames that would evoke what the final title sequence would be. So it's coming up with what are the 4 images that are going to be the best portrayal of this idea. So I think I've got 3 pages of thumbnails up here. And so what I like to do is I start with a 90-minute, what I call an open mode session. The open mode is a term I learned from, there was a wonderful John Cleese talk back in 1991. It's on YouTube. If you search John Cleese creativity talk, you'll find it. But he talked about John Cleese from Monty Python, his wonderful comic actor and writer, did amazing work in the 70s and 80s. And he talked about his creative process, and it starts with being in the open mode, which is when you are completely open to any idea, and then having a separate closed mode when you are executing the idea. So this is trying to be in the open mode where I'm just 90 minutes with no distractions, just on and here I'm in my computer, just in Photoshop, sketching out ideas just with a pencil tool, just using black and white, not trying to be fancy or anything. I normally like to do this outside of the computer, just on pen and paper. but it doesn't make too much of a difference. I was mainly doing this in the computer so I could screen record it for the course. But just coming up with any idea and really having any idea be valid in that time, because these aren't going to the client. The client won't see these, but trying to explore things that might not work, that might be silly, that might seem absurd, that might seem completely irrelevant to the brief, putting them down anyway. I think what one great little technique you can use is, if you're stuck on a brief of what to come up with, try to come up with the worst possible solution for that brief and say, well, what's really not going to work? What is the client going to hate? And then that kind of gives you permission to do anything, because it's not going to happen. So you can make something absurd, some silly with a wrong tone, and it kind of gets you just using your pencil and making things. And also, it might teach you something about, if this is the opposite of the brief, maybe the opposite of this is what the client will like, or what will be a great solution to the brief as well. So I think that's a fun little exercise to kind of loosen yourself up and get you making stuff without overthinking and thinking, oh, this isn't going to be good. That's what this whole kind of process is about, is just getting any idea out there without your judgment of, oh, this won't look good, I won't write it down. Just get it all down, and then you can pick later. So that's what all these designs are about. And you can see a lot of them kind of build off one another. I think in the second, mode, AO2, it's called, we get the bacteriophage in the top left, and it just starts as drawing it, and then I draw a little box around, oh, if we crop it into here, this could look cool. And what if it was a sequence of it? I think I had an idea of it sort of falling onto I'm not sure what it would be falling into, a cell, and then sort of it injects a protein, I think, into it. It's how it works. I thought that could be a cool, like, sort of visual of like a lunar lander sort of landing on a planet, and then the people coming out. But kind of referencing that kind of imagery is what I was kind of trying to evoke, of like, what are things we recognize as being in a grand sort of space cosmic scale, but then having these microorganisms and chemical elements in there. So that's what this stage was all about, just getting lots of ideas down. I think I had a few ideas for sort of the titles as well, but a lot of the other ones had atoms, and I think the other one I chose was of a molecule and a paramecium, which is like a little bacteria. Looking, those little squiggly little guys you see under the under the microscope. But particularly, I chose paramecium because that's. I also wanted to have these things be actually, as scientifically accurate as you can, because when you're making a design, you have to make these choices anyway of what it is going to look like. You may as well make it something that isn't going to annoy the people who watch it, who are chemists and biologists. And I find I enjoy that process a lot more when I think, like, if I treat it as real as possible, of like, oh no, how can I make this like really good as well, like really accurate? I have a lot more fun doing that, rather than it feels like, I have to pick something, I'll do this and churn through it. When I actually treat it like, oh no, I want to make sure this is as good as I can possibly get it, I find I'm a lot more motivated to continue it, even though it might be more work.
Well, and going back to what you were saying in the beginning too, how, sort of the birth of the YouTube channel was really kind of like to try to maybe draw in some more clients and everything. I mean, that's just another sort of great thing to do, even as a freelancer or just designer, animator in general, to be as accurate as you possibly can be, because again, you never know who's going to be looking at these things. And, of course we all have like some sort of abstract stuff, or we, fictionalize certain subjects or whatever, but that research phase, like you're saying, and really like making sure it's as accurate as possible, you just never know what eyeballs are going to be on it. And that could lead to an opportunity down the road. So, again, a great point with the research part of it, and, bringing that into these early sort of design sketches.
And I think, like, because you have to make these choices. We have to, whatever we design, we're going to have to draw it or make it in Illustrator. We have to decide the shape. Right. We may as well make that choice consciously, because it takes more effort, but individually they don't make too much of a difference. Like, oh, do I round the corner on this triangle? But over time, if you make 1,000 of those decisions at a project, I think they can make a big difference. They will compound, and it builds a cohesive sort of final project that was clearly thought about. And when even if it is, either the wrong direction or the client doesn't like it and you have to make changes, that's fine. But at least you'll have a reasoning. The worst answer for when a client says, "Why is it like this?" and you say, "I don't know. I just did it like that." If you have an
Right.
answer saying, "Oh, I've rounded the corners to soften it, to make it a bit more approachable, so it doesn't seem as aggressive or as energetic, it's a little softer," something like that, it helps them understand that, oh, these things are decisions, and that we are offering something of value, and that is, we're not just handing them off this brief. They're not just handing us off a brief, and we're just making something back. We're not just a pair of hands that produce what they want. We're adding additional insight that they might not have, that they might not have time to decide what how rounded all the corners are, or what type is chosen, or how the shapes are formatted, or what color is there. That's one of the things I really try to teach in the course, is like, the more you think about all this stuff, the more you have input on like how you can change what you want the result to be. That's such a powerful tool to figure out. Well, I think first you need to figure out what you want it to be. What's the end goal? What kind of mood do you want to set? And that's the point of the mood board, is like, I want to evoke this feeling. And I learned that from, I know I'm opening up a lot of tangents here, but I learned that at Buck. Really, they were so focused on the mood boards and pitch decks. They put a lot of effort into, because that is something that is one of the main things the client is going to experience, and that they are going to kind of not grade the project on, but that is also something that you can kind of grade it on yourself. Like, if you're working on a design and it doesn't fit in that mood board as the same kind of thing, you're probably not on the right track, and it gives you something to aim against, that you can think, oh, well, my images are a lot brighter than these ones. Maybe if I make some more darker color choices, it can more closely evoke that mood that we want, like to be either mysterious or something like that. Because that is really hard when you're just on your own, in your own head, in Illustrator, thinking about, what decisions should I be making? Besides trying to make it look cool, you can think, well, I should be making it look mysterious. I should be making it look playful. And having those words or ideas or mood board just on your second monitor can help you sort of guide you on which kind of choices to make there. So, and try to choose, like, if you're tossing up between ideas, like, oh, rounded corners or pointed corners, which one of those is going to get me closer to this feeling, to this emotion, to this final result? And I think that is helpful. Now, I think I'm trying to work backwards. You can jump in here, because I'm not sure if I lost the train throughout that.
No. The train's going totally in the right direction. No. This is great. Well, and I think you're alluding to something, which I love how you wrote it on your website about this course too. And I think, you're saying this indirectly without saying it, how you have it worded on your website, but you said design isn't just about aesthetics, it's about intention. And I think you're saying it, here with all the little, like, well, if I do rounded corners, this gives off a certain like mood or feeling versus like very pointed corners. And it's something, it's funny, when I first started this podcast, I was asking this question of myself, of other designers who were, whether it was work that won the pitch or ended up on the floor, sort of like, why did they make like those design decisions or those creative decisions? And, over time, whether it's been said directly or indirectly, it's come down to this very thing that you're saying right now. And even on your website for the course, it's intention, like, why are we creating, why are we making the decisions that we're making? Well, what's the creative brief look like? What does the client want? What are the client's goals? I mean, like, every design decision has a why. And, I think that's why I'm happy that we decided to sort of discuss these frames today, because I think you so eloquently articulate it. I think that, to say like, it's not just about aesthetics, it's about intention, couldn't hit the nail on the head more perfectly. I don't know, I'm rambling here, but I love how you describe the whole sort of process and come to this conclusion that, hey, if you're going to design this, or you're going to animate this, like, think back to what the client said, or your mood board, or the summary that you wrote, like always have that reference, the why, define that why and then reference that why constantly. So
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's important to have that direction to help you navigate towards, because even if you miss like that's fine. You can come back around, or if that's not the right direction, at least you're heading somewhere and not just making these choices seemingly at random that lead your project to be kind of feeling a bit all over the place without that direction and intentionality. I think like the work that I love the most, and I think in almost any medium, not just design, but in music and art and film, is like something that wants to say one thing and just says it really well, really, or at least is confident, even if it's wrong or misses. It's a big swing in this one direction, and I think that is very helpful practice. Like making those little decisions. I think how you become a better designer and have a more creative eye is through that repetition. I remember
Yeah.
speaking. I think one of the hardest questions in design is like how do you be a better designer? It is such an amorphous thing, and I think one of the key elements is taste. Like like that is one of the hardest things to teach. Like how to know when something is good and when something is not good. And I think the key is to just having lots of those uh, little repetitions of looking at something, assessing is that doing what I want it to do, or is it not? Like, and those you might do 1,000 of those in an hour when you're working in Illustrator or Photoshop, where you're moving a vector, an anchor point this way, and like, that isn't doing what I want it to do, so I'll move it back. And you're not thinking about it consciously, but you're doing lots of these throughout the day, and even just looking like through your life, looking at a movie poster and go, they messed that up. I wouldn't have done that way. Like in your head, you're making a little edit and assessing what is pleasing to you, even if you're not thinking about the end outcome to the client or whether it serves its purpose. You're making a little judgment for yourself of like, oh, that's doing something really good, and I like that. Or even shopping and collecting little knickknacks of like, oh, I like how that vase looks. That color will look great in my place. Those are all these subconscious decisions that we make, and I think particularly those that I think a lot of people certainly get more experience from that as a young child. Like if you have more time working in design, you will have built up more of those repetitions and have a better eye for it there. But I think you can like start with any project and just the more you focus on that, and you don't need to be like locked in like vein pulsing in your forehead trying to think about every single decision. Like a lot of these come subconsciously. I think most designers who ask them how did you make that choice, they 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 aren't consciously thinking about all of those little things. They just have an instinct for it of like, oh, I wanted to make it angry, so I made it very sharp and had like lots of contrasting red colors and some grungy texture to do that. But then they weren't necessarily thinking, how do I make this angry? This texture, not angry enough. I'll choose this one. That becomes a subconscious, just part of your decisions. But I think the more intentional you can be in making those when you are particularly wanting to progress and learning and wanting to level up, I think the more of those choices you can make, the better.
Yeah. Well, and I'm happy you touched upon the whole sort of like subconscious intuitive sort of approach to design too, because I was going to ask you, and I think I know the answer based on what you were just saying, but you had talked about even with the mood boards for this that you wanted to kind of like take this sort of like very microscopic world and make it very macro. And you've referenced like like a lunar landing and space and all this stuff. But when you look at the mood board, at least when I look at it, I don't see any like sort of like space
Mm.
exploration imagery. So again, to what you're saying, there's got to be times like you had said, you can be very intentional, but kind of let that subconscious mind kind of like create some happy accidents or push the idea in a certain direction. I mean, when you were thinking about the concept for this, were you intuitively thinking about like just space, or had you referenced to like some space imagery? I'm just curious now that we're talking about this.
Yes, I believe so. I think I in the in the description I maybe mentioned, I think cosmic scale. Like I think
Okay.
microorganisms seen from a cosmic scale. There was some kind of wording around that. And I think one of the images is just like these two large spheres and a tiny person being like in between them, and it's
Yeah.
more about the scale of something being large and small, and not knowing like initially at what scale we're looking at, because the point was to make like chemistry is probably like, it's not the most exciting thing to put up on screen. There's not many, like most big exciting sci-fi movies are about space exploration or alien life and like biology and those kind of things. Chemistry, not quite so much. Normally, if chemistry is involved, it's about how the chemistry is, changing a person or changing an element. It's like they're acting on something else. But it was the point of this was because it was going to be an intro to a documentary series about life and chemistry, is to make the chemistry interesting and like, oh, these little molecules that you see in your textbook, they're like, yeah, these atoms I don't want to study. We can make them look like they can be interesting. They can be as interesting as a spaceship, like, and can be as massive. Because when you're at that scale, like all of these chemical interactions are like, planets colliding. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm exaggerating, but making it feel like that, like, oh, this is big and important. And I think, particularly with that frame, like making it seem large, like it's this bacteriophage, but you're looking up at it. So like the hypothetical camera in that situation would have to be so minuscule, but like you're seeing this tiny thing, but it's up there, and you can see the underside of it as if you were seeing a building, and like those. That was kind of my thinking about the whole space nature and about that large sort of cosmic scale, and I think, and it marries particularly well, I think, because those kind of abstract space imagery, like that you get of like of space, of like what are they called after the galaxies, where there's the big clouds of space dust, and they form those kind of shapes.
Nebulas?
And that's exactly.
Is that it?
Exactly. I think it was. Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, and they kind of look like ink spilling, and like it kind of looks like something at a small scale as well, like just this mixing of colors where you don't know the scale, because like, this dust, are those stars? Like you sort of lose that context of scale when you can't see a human or a building or a banana in there. Like the way we live our life is like, oh, we see these medium scale things, but very tiny things, very big things are so distant that they kind of just seem like otherworldly, and like, what if they wrap back around and you kind of see that same sort of it. Yeah, they kind of marry back at that point. That was kind of the goal for this, so that's how I tried to approach it.
Oh, very cool. Well, yeah. No, so you've been describing how, sort of you start with this sort of like big, wide open, sort of like brain dump of like sketches and everything after you've mood boarded and everything. Once you've kind of done that and you're kind of honing in on a few of the thumbnails or sketches that are kind of resonating and everything, I mean, what happens next for you in the process? Are you then jumping right into like Photoshop or Illustrator, or are you refining those sketches further? What does the process look like from there?
Well, immediately the next step is sleep, or ideally have one night of sleep, maybe a week if you can. As much time as you can have between coming up with the ideas and then choosing which ones to move ahead with, I find is helpful, because often I'll just get so excited about one idea in the process. And sometimes that's great. If you're excited about something, I will often say, go with that one, because you will be, even if it's not the best idea, you will be able to make it the best idea, because you're going to put more effort into it and put more love and care to it. But often I can just get excited about something and think, oh, I'll do all this work on it, and then come back the next day and think, what was I thinking? That doesn't answer the brief at all. So ideally, if there's some time to reflect and look at it from fresh eyes after that excitement is tempered a bit and you can kind of see them objectively. I picked the best four from that, which is, one of them was the title, because I think the brief had to have the title in there, and then the other three were all at different scales. So one's a molecule, which is the smallest one, then the bacteriophage, then the paramecium, where it starts to be what we recognize as a living cell, and so I chose those three. There was also an option to choose like a sequence. Do I want the same thing, just like doing three different things, like the molecule at a small scale, like the molecule, then the molecule breaking apart, and then them sort of floating away. But I figured for this project, it would be better to show four different things, because essentially that's like the client seeing one Styleframe. They're not going to care too much about that animation process when they see the designs. They want to say, oh, what are these different elements going to look like? And that also gives you, three chances to make a good impression to the client to think, oh, I don't like the other ones, but I like this. But if you're only choosing one, it's more likely, oh, I don't like that one, and you don't have anything that I like, so we're going to go with a different studio. So I like to show within obviously the constraints of the project as much variation in that, like show these are the edges of the box we're kind of creating for this title sequence to live in. So we're going to show the 3 different scales. So from picking those, I went into Photoshop to refine these sketches. Now you can do this like in pencil and paper. I prefer to do this in Photoshop, even if I do the initial thumbnails on paper. I take them into Photoshop. Either I take a photo or scan them in. Normally, I might just recreate them in Photoshop because it's not. Normally, the thumbnails are so small. It's just quicker to draw them again. And then when I'm drawing them again, I'm making new decisions. I'm not kind of trying to match the thumbnail, which is I'm not thinking too much about the composition there. I'm not thinking too much about the shapes. They're kind of wonky, and I don't want to bring that wonkiness into this stage. But I really like to refine them as much as I can before I get into any vector format. And this is something, again, I learned at Buck, that they put so much effort into the design, and even before the design, into the kind of sketches and in the animatics, like the pre-production. It was way more of the duration of a project than I first imagined. Because normally, before that, I approached it like, oh, you kind of rush through the storyboards and the sketches so that you can then you can get through the design. Then you can get to the animation where you're going to spend most of your time. But I learned that the more time you spend in the design, the less time you need to spend animating, and the more clear the project is. It's kind of like eating your vegetables first, like making the design decisions and figuring out what doesn't work for you and the client as well. Then by the time you get to animation, you're just rolling downhill. It is so easy. You're just bringing these things that the client has already approved, that you've already made. You're adding life to them, and you don't need to check in as much with the client. And when you do, there's not going to be that many surprises because they've already seen this thing develop and look ideally what the final thing is going to look like. So for these sketches, I try to get these as close as possible to the final thing, even though they're pretty loose. Like I'm not worried about the line quality because I'm going to recreate them in vectors, but I have them in the position where I want them. And I like to do this in Photoshop because you just have more tools digitally, like to flip things and to lasso tool and warp things around and to quickly duplicate artboards and try different compositions of moving things in different places. But really trying to make those decisions as early on as possible. Once I've, you're going wild with coming up with what are all the ideas, like how are we going to execute that? It's like, well, where are we going to put these lines? Where are we going to put these curves? Where are we going to put these text elements to say what we want to say? Because we have to make that decision eventually. We may as well do it when it's loose in black and white, where making a mistake costs nothing. It's one undo or an erase something. It's not, oh, we've already animated half the scene and now it doesn't work. Now we're going to have to, there's days and days of work that we need to, redo, that we've already lost and we need to do again to make changes. Like, it's much better to find that out earlier. I know it, like, no one wants to do that. Everyone wants to kind of kick the can down the road a bit, like, it's good enough. The client will approve this. Then we can start having fun and making some fun, colorful designs and start animating. But you'd rather discover that problem in black and white, in pencil, rather than, in full color, in full animation.
Oh, for sure. Well, and, it looks like that, at least for your workflow, this process of sort of like sketching, getting sort of like the basic, what did you call them? They're not vector shapes, but sketches, thumbnails to sketches to then vector shapes, like grayscale vector shapes, to then going into like a fully colorized design. I mean, like that's a long process. And as you're saying, like as you start to like include more sort of elements like color and lighting and so on and so forth, then you have like harder decisions to sort of make. even in these like early thumbnail or even sketching phases, are you thinking about the color? Or are you really just sort of, again, still focusing on the, like, okay, like what is just the composition going to look like? Like, how is this going to be framed? What's going to be, what's the contrast going to look like? Yeah, I'm just curious if you're thinking about color this early on, or if that's really being influenced by these, I guess, earlier sort of grayscale phases.
Mm, I think I do try to segment as much as possible what I'm thinking about so that I'm only focusing on composition. I'm not trying to think about color as well, because you're juggling a lot of things there. Like, I think you can
Yeah,
make the best composition when you're just focusing on composition. Of course, color is a part of that, like having contrast and drawing the eye is
right.
something you do have to be thinking a little bit about, but I'm not making specific choices of like, or is this going to be a cool red or a dark red? I may be thinking about, well, the background's going to be dark, so this element's going to be lighter and to stand out from it. I'm kind of thinking about it at that level. During the mood board phase and the initial kind of pitch, like the document, the first thing I'd send to a client, I am thinking about a color palette, more about, okay, this is the mood that we're going to go for. I think color is a lot. I think it's where you can be a lot more looser and less like. I think color is less of a science. I'm sure some colorists and color graders would argue with me about that, but I don't find it particularly helpful to go in and try to, well, how much red value in this is going to evoke the same thing, because like a red, like sometimes I see descriptions of like, here's the key to master color theory in 15 minutes online, and it's like red is an angry color. Don't use red if you want things to be like, but you can see red not used in angry ways. It's used in so much, like companies and fast food, like everyone uses every color to make any decision, like, and especially those color wheel things. Master color theory, use the color wheel. Complementary colors, they work well, but also triad colors, they work well, and pentaveret colors, they work well. I'm like, well, that's every color. That's not that helpful. So every color
That's
can be
true.
used to evoke every emotion. I think it's how they relate to the other colors around them. So I unless, like, if a client has, hey, this is their brand color, use this. That's makes your
Right.
job a little easier. It's like, okay, well, now I can choose what colors to put around that evoke the tone that I want to. Because I think in the mood board, like, I will also like manipulate images in a mood board. Another thing I learned from Buck is like,
Oh,
you
cool.
can like go and shift the hue, add your own elements on top, like do whatever you need to evoke the mood that you want. Because I think in that example, I had a little blue gradient to the bottom of one of them, and I flipped the colors of, like, there was a diagram that I inverted, so it's darker and has white outlines, and just so they all kind of matched and were cohesive. So even though the color palette I end up with is quite opposite of that, it's like using lots of reds and dark colors, it's still kind of like it matches cohesively in that sense. Like, they're all similar, kind of dark and sort of moody in that regard. Um, so that's what I'm not thinking too much of that at this phase. I'm like, okay, I've done that thinking. The colors are going to be moody when I get to colors. At the moment, excuse me. At this point, I'm deciding shapes. So I'm deciding
Yeah.
what shapes they're going to be. I've got the idea of what the content of the image is going to be, and I'm like, well, what shapes are they going to look like? And I try not to think too much about that. And then the next stage that I go to is creating the vectors in Greyscale. Now, this is kind of, it's like an in-between step. This isn't going, I'm not going to show the client these Greyscale images. This is more so that I can sort of like, transfer those sketches into vectors. Like, okay, I'm just making the sketches that I have, I'm just making shapes out of them now. And I do them in Grayscale just so I can play with contrast. So I can figure out what the contrast is going to be, and draw the shapes at the same time. If I start adding colors here, like, things are not going to work. It's going to be a longer journey before things start looking good. And it'll take a lot of experimentation. And I find that just confuses my process for me, when I'm like, oh, it's not working, but it's hard for me to tell, is it the color that's not working or is it the shapes? Whereas now I can say, okay, the shapes are sorted. I'm happy with the shapes. And now I'm happy with the composition and the contrast that we've got here. Then I go in and add the color. All right, I was getting heated up about drone vectors. All right, so
Well, and
where
you
I
were
was,
just about to talk about color too, and like coincidentally, the
yeah.
color cuts out.
Okay, so when I'm drawing those vector shapes, at that point, I'm for this kind of project where it's going to be colored with a lot of gradients, and I want to have a lot of control. I will do all of that coloring in Photoshop. So I will save the Illustrator file. I'll separate everything as I need to. I'll separate as much as I can, and then just save that AI file as a PSD. Took me a long while to realize that you can do that. So I just want to
Oh
mention that
wow.
technically, yeah, you can save an Illustrator file as a PSD, then you can import that into Photoshop, and everything's just nicely separated. And then my process for coloring these is I just use clipping masks. So I will, like, whatever the Illustrator layer is, create a clipping mask, and these are all made just with the soft brush tool, like the circle brush, like with the soft gradient, and like I'm just clicking and dragging with my mouse. I'm not using my tablet at all for this, just to get a gradient. And I think I use the same colors here, um, and like I'll just go through it. So the process of creating the shading on like one of these spheres that we have in the molecule one is I have like a dark red color that I will go and shade it with. Then I'll have an orange and then a white. I'll lower the size of the brush each time so that the gradient is less gradual. So it's more softer at the edge when it's red bleeding into the black. Then when it gets into the orange, it's a little tighter gradient. And then to the white, it's like a very almost like we can get a crisp line at the edge. That's how I do that. Now, for this project, I just focused on the title sequence first to figure out the colors. Because I knew there's no point coloring them all in and then really realizing I don't like the color. So I focused on the simplest one. And I tried a lot of stuff just to try to get the colors that worked well. And particularly because this isn't going to be like just flat, just vector colors. There's going to be a lot of gradients and sort of things moving in and out of different colors. I wasn't like particularly setting like, here are the 5 colors that I'm going to use. Normally in Illustrator, I'll start off with like, I'll just draw like 9 boxes. I'll pick not quite random colors, but like I'll do, oh, here are 3 blues, a dark, a medium, a light blue, a contrasting color of anything else, and a couple of others, and just chuck them, just like eye drop them into the designs and see what works. Like, and then just like duplicate that artboard and then try something else and do that a whole bunch of times and make slight adjustments to them all. And I use the recolor tool a lot in Illustrator, where you can, I think it's Command R, maybe that's a shortcut I've set up. But you can go to Edit Recolor, select the layers you want, and you have like the color wheel, and it has like little lines and spokes that correspond to the colors, and you can move them around and just quickly change things and see what works. And you can even, there's a randomize tool as well, which I use sometimes to just show me some other colors, see what works. Because often, like most of the time, it's a mess, but sometimes it'll give you some weird combination that I'm not thinking of. Because that's something that I tend to fall the trap into making sort of just generic expected color choices, like this plant, green, sky, that'll be blue. But the designs I really love the most are people that make, oh, that sky, that's olive green. And then this tree's like a dark brown color. And it's like, we can get away with so much, especially in motion design and illustration. Skies, the sky can be any color in real life. Like the skies can be orange and purple and black and all sorts of things. It's rarely like perfect medium blue. But when we're in design illustration, it can be any color, like any color you need. But I always forget that. So that's something I try to like, I'll just randomize occasionally and try to do unexpected colors just to mix things up a bit.
Yeah.
But for this
well,
one,
I'd
I was
love
like,
to hear how you got to the sort of like red color palette for this, because, you know, like you were saying before, you know, when you think of like this tiny microscopic scale or like a big macro scale, like the, you know, the universe or galaxy or whatever, you know, you think of these dark, dramatic, like black, dark blues and this and that. And this is like totally totally the opposite direction. It's very warm, but also very dramatic, being very warm. So I'm curious, like how you got this sort of like warmer red toned color palette in your designs as well.
Well, I think I started this one from having just the contrast. Like, okay, this text is going to be illuminated from the back, so it's going to be like there's a sun. So the back will be white, and then these two sort of big planet shapes, they'll be dark. And I want to have sort of shadows casting on these little sphere objects inside them. So I'm like, okay, I know the kind of contrast section here, and then I think I added a bit of color. I may have started with blue, I think, just for those gradients on the planets. But in this stage, I'm not trying to. This isn't like a still that's going to go into production that I'm going to import into After Effects or anything. I'm just messing about with I'm adding like different layer styles, and sometimes I'll just put a color on top, like one layer that's just like say if I did those in blue, I'm like, well, I want to try different colors, so I'd put like an orange just layer, flat rectangle of orange, or just fill a whole layer with orange, and then set it like the blending mode to color or overlay or something, and then just mess with a hue slider on that layer, so I can kind of just transform the whole layers, the whole image's color at once, and test things like that and say, oh, would it work like this? And I think at one point, I think that sort of warm red and orange kind of looked pretty cool. So I'm like, oh, I'll stick with that. And at this point, like all the layers underneath are probably still blue. And then I'm like, I went back in and I did particularly want to have some contrast in the color. So there's like lots of some blues, and it's kind of like a blue, green, teal in the shadows, and then a little bit of blue in the highlights as well. And there were, I think, quite a few different versions of this. I'll see if I can find some of those old ones I saved that maybe tell that journey with more specificity. But I just tried a lot of stuff until it worked. Again, being really messy. All the colors are probably all different, like different, hex codes on their individual layers, but underneath all of these adjustment layers, they all worked. So then what I would do is try to, for the other designs, like once I was happy with this one, go in and make those choices a bit more cohesive. And I think what I would do is like, this probably has like 3 adjustment layers, like one of noise, one that is like, it's probably like an orange layer set to 20% opacity that has overlay on it, or soft light that kind of brings everything underneath it into this kind of warmer tone. I just copy all of those layers into the other PSD, and then underneath that, try to match these 3 colors as close as possible, like just using the color selector. So like, okay, what is my red, what is my orange, what is my green going to be, so that when I add these adjustment layers on top, they will look like those colors, if that makes sense. There might be a complicated way to do it. Those adjustment layers are not doing crazy stuff. They're like slight adjustments to the hue and maybe to curves. I'm not changing the colors rapidly. Like it would just be a little duller, I think, before I added those on. Just because I know I'm going to use those adjustment layers on everything, and especially if there's effects that I can't get just using the flat colors. I try to make it as easy as possible to replicate on other designs, to having as close as I can to it. These are my color palettes in my swatches, even though the swatches would be slightly different than the outcome because of the adjustment layers. All right, I think I've said enough about that. But then I go ahead and apply that to all the other frames. Each one of them had their own challenges. Throughout this journey, there is more white and it gets lighter throughout the sequence, because I wanted to show like life starting in these dark sort of primordial soup. And I think sort of the red kind of evokes like an organic, like blood. Like these things are like, oh, they're in this living soup. And then these molecules come together, and there's the faintest bit of light like coming across one edge, as if the sun is just sort of cresting over the side of a planet. And then the bacteriophage is a bit more. And then the paramecium, it's kind of catching the edge light of this kind of cell wall kind of thing. And then in the final, it's sort of just bursting out through the middle, and everything's illuminated. So that's like the climax of the sequence is going to be that release where you just get all the white energy that you're seeing a little bit throughout the sequence. And I do try to like just practically through all of these, I'm doing one light source with that red warm light, and then on the opposite side, as like sort of a rim light, I'm adding the that sort of green, sort of teal element, just to backlight and more to define the shapes so people can see it in 3 dimensions.
You're now starting to talk about like sort of like lighting decisions and stuff like that. Like I'm curious at this point, as you're sort of like applying color to these sort of like your vector sketches and everything, as you're incorporating some lighting decisions, some color decisions, I know animation's down the road, is that influencing any of these decisions that are further up in the sort of like ideation process? Or are you just purely like just thinking about, hey, this is how I want it to look. We're going to leave animation, for later.
All right. So yes, you asked about animation.
Yes. Is animation at this point influencing any of your sort of color and lighting, these sort of like fine touch design decisions as you're sort of nearing the end of the, design phase, if you will?
Less at this point, I think. I try not to think too much about animation during the design process. I think that's impossible not to, especially if you're animating it. But I find that hinders the design a lot more than it helps, because I start trying to cut corners to make my animation job easier. Whereas when I've worked at places like Buck, normally like there is some overlap between the designers and animators, but often the animators on the team aren't working in the design phase because they're normally on different projects at that point. So you'll get a design, and it has been just been made to be the best design possible. Obviously, the animation is thought out through the storyboard, so they know the sequence is planned and will work. But then I find it's an interesting and a funner animation challenge to try to make this design work and get there. Now, obviously, if it's crazy and they've designed some crazy cell animation that we don't have time and the budget for, that's not going to work. But normally it's kind of figured out that, you will have a day or two to animate this, so it's not, you have time to experiment and find things. You won't have that in every project for every budget, but normally I'd figure that out in the initial storyboarding phase, or like thumbnailing where I had here. I'm like, okay, this is the sequence, this is what we have time to do in animation. Normally I'll try to split up, let's say if I have 10 days to work on a project, hypothetically, or 10 days for design and animation, I'd probably spend 6 days on design at least, and then maybe 4 on animation. Certain projects I might want to spend less, but for the kind of work I do, that would be how I'd split it. I find the time is more effectively spent in design, making something look good, and then less time to animate it is fine, because normally you don't need to animate too much on the designs. For these ones, especially when I'm coloring like this, I know that everything I'm doing in Photoshop, not everything, but I will be recreating in After Effects, probably with masks. Actually, for this one, I could probably reuse a lot of those layers, but I know the vectors, I won't be able to convert the vector layers in Photoshop to vectors in After Effects, I don't think. So I'd just be recreating them with shapes and then masks for the lighting anyway. So I'm just trying to get the coolest lighting possible to really sell these designs. Then I'll figure that out in animation later. That's how I'd like to think about it. I know roughly my time budget for how much I can spend on these. I'm like, as long as I'm within that, it'll be fine.
Oh, it's good to know. Yeah, no, I mean, hey, if you kind of know how long it takes to kind of get the animation side of things done, and you can sort of like give yourself some extra time on the design side, I totally agree. just like the more we can refine that design stage, if we'll figure out the animation stuff later if we need to, if we come across some challenges there too, which there are always inevitably some challenges that you come across with every project. But yeah, no, that's really cool. I love to hear that you're really focused a lot on the design before you jump into animation. It kind of sounds like, and I could be wrong, maybe I'm just sort of speculating here, that the design maybe then starts to inform some of your animation decisions down the road.
Absolutely. I'd rather the design influence the animation decisions than the animation that hasn't happened yet be influencing the design based on, I think that might be difficult, so I won't do that, even though it'll look better. I'd rather be faced with that challenge later than, hinder it now based on hypothetical animation worries.
For sure, for sure. Well, you've been so generous with your time to kind of walk through your whole like ideation and creative development process with us, which I can't thank you enough for. There's always two questions that I have to ask at the end, though. We've highlighted this particular frame and this set of frames for this project that you've shared with us today. But on this set of frames, what would you say was the biggest challenge and reward about working on them?
Oh, the biggest challenge I think would be either getting actually that those color palettes figured out for that title sequence for that title card. I think getting those colors was definitely felt the most difficult because up until that point, I'm kind of making decisions that I was kind of comfortable with. Color is always tricky for me, so that's a lot of experimentation and figuring that out, and that just doesn't go to plan always. Like I need to iterate and make lots of variations on that. But I was really happy when I got to this result, but it took a little while to get there. I think finding that balance with getting those greens and that contrasted color in there, which I think works better on the other elements where there's a lot more contrast, but because everything is so front and center, I had to find little areas to get these in the shadows here that are kind of a bit more of a stretch in a sense. Like the other one, it leads to there's a light source from this side creating this light, so I can add these colors in here. But otherwise, it's like, how do I? If it's all this one light, how am I adding these contrasting elements in and finding little places for that? What was a challenge? That was probably the most difficult. And was it the most rewarding? Was that the
Yeah,
I think
biggest reward.
biggest reward? I think was I think then going through and doing the shading after that on the other frames, particularly with that bacteria phage. Now that like the colors are set, I can just turn this like black and white, boring-ish looking image into something really cool and dynamic. I love that process, just getting the that soft circle brush and just drawing lines, almost like I'm spray painting the edge in different layers and sort of adding those layers up. And it just every new line you draw, it gets better and better. And I thought that part of the process is great. Once we've gone through the ugly phase and we're coming out the other side, where it's starting to just get more crisp and more refined, I really find satisfying.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, and then so this is the follow up to that question. I might have an idea why it might be your favorite frame, but I always have to ask this of the guests as well. What about this frame or these sets of frames, make it your favorite frame?
I think this is just my favorite because I think it has all of the elements that I really like in a design. Like it's got a big moody composition, but it's got very fun, unique shapes as well. Like especially with that bacteria phage, like it's pretty alien and weird. Like we've got all these spheres and like cylinders poking out and a big sort of hexagonal, triangular, polygonal, crazy shape at the top that are unusual, that are really fun to work with, and it's like subject matter that I really enjoy because I mean I chose them. So working with these kind of scientific elements was really fun to me. And then trying to be a bit more cinematic than I usually am, with less sort of flat vector things, like adding all the little bokeh and like lens flares and little touches like that I rarely get to, was just a lot of fun, a very fun process, and the result was I think better than I expected. So yeah, it turned out great.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I couldn't agree more. I think it turned out great as well. I can't thank you enough again for sharing all this time with us today, talking about this project, these frames. It's just been so cool to hear how you sort of go through the whole concept development and ideation process. If people want to connect with you to learn more about, what you're working on, what's the best way for them to do so?
Oh, thank you, Caroline. Thank you so much for having me. The best place you can reach me is it's at YouTube. Go to YouTube at Ben Marriott. If you search Ben Marriott, you'll find me there, or on my website at benmarriott.com if you want to see any of the other larger projects that I'm working on there. They're over there.
Very cool. Well, we'll be sure to share your information and some of the resources and tools and software that we've mentioned here for our audience to check out. But that wraps it up for today, everyone. Feel free to email us at styleframesatpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think of the show. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, if you like what you see and hear here, please don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and review the show on your favorite podcasting platforms as well. Lastly, come connect with us on social. We're on Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you again, Ben, for joining us today, and we'll see you all in the next one.
Thank you so much.